the Savage God, the Mad King, the Lance of Fury Nikador. Today I will tell you most important things you need to know about him to defeat him and all the other MoC 12 enemies, so you can get all the rewards before the MoC refreshes. So let's start. The first thing you might have noticed with this enemy are those ghost characters of ours, right? Before going into what they do, let's understand why we want to kill them. Well, we want to kill them because when they die, Lance of Fury will get a big chunk of damage, like around 14% of his HP will be reduced. What's another reason? In the second phase, so let's say he's in the second phase right now, all the characters that have been conquered, that's the terminology for in Honkai Star Rail terms. So Ho-Ho is here conquered, you can say Robin is conquered here. When your character are conquered, they take more damage in the second phase. So surviving is a bit harder then. So if you make sure your conquered characters are killed, then they would take less damage from Lance of Fury. And the other reason why I want to kill these conquered characters is that in the second phase, this weird angel-looking thing of Lance of Fury, this thing right here, will do this very big AoE attack, which you can see right here in the action bar in the second phase. When he does this big attack, he has a higher chance to imprison all the conquered characters. So if every one of your team was conquered, they would be more likely to be imprisoned, which is bad since when you get imprisoned, your action will be delayed by quite a lot and you cannot do anything until your turn comes. So even when you cleanse the imprisonment, your action would have already been delayed, which is bad. So if you can make sure that you can kill Lance of Fury before this weird angel thing can do this big AoE attack, then you will be more likely to clear this MoC in the necessary cycles. But as you can see here, I still have 2 cycles left and he already does this big AoE attack of his. If I can just bite through that AoE attack, I survive it, even if Ekli or someone else gets imprisoned, doesn't matter, it really depends how many cycles you have left. The best case, you want him dead before that, but if you can't, of course, got to bite through it. And as you can see, only a Ho-Ho of mine got conquered here, so she would be more likely to be imprisoned after this attack. But okay, what else do we need to know about these conquered characters? Well, that's the first thing you might have noticed, is that when your characters get conquered, you see that their restorable HP is reduced by 50%. So how do I make sure that this gray bar here goes away so I can be more tanky? Well, that is when you attack the corresponding conquered character of yours. So if I attack this Ho-Ho right here that got conquered, my real Ho-Ho, her restorable HP would increase depending on how much HP I have reduced of the conquered Ho-Ho. So let's say I've reduced this conquered Ho-Ho's HP by 50%, then my real Ho-Ho's HP, her restorable HP, would also be saved by 50%. And of course, if I kill the conquered Ho-Ho, then she wouldn't have that debuff anymore and she would be saved. But there is a nice thing. When attacking a conquered ally of yours, if that attacking ally is the ally that got conquered, so let's say Eklia here, if Eklia attacks herself, then she would do like 100% more damage to this Eklia. But of course, in this team, Sunday isn't going to attack, Robin isn't going to attack, Ho-Ho isn't going to attack. Well, Ho-Ho will attack, but she will do like neglectable damage. So basically, all you need to know is killing these conquered allies makes your life easier because Lance of Fury takes a lot of damage when they die. Your real characters would take less damage in the second phase, so assuming this is the second phase. And that big AoE attack of that angel thing in the second phase would be less likely to imprison your allies. And of course, if they are dead, that means now you have the max restorable HP of yourself available again. So now let's go to the other elephant in the room, and that is these stacks right here. Why are they important for us? Well, when we reduce these stacks to 0, some things will happen. First, the character that reduced these stacks to 0 will get some energy. The other thing is that Lance of Fury will take quite a lot of damage and his action will be delayed. And when you attack him when he has 0 stacks, he will take additional damage. So we see reducing his stacks to 0 is quite beneficial for us. But how do we reduce his stacks to begin with then? Well, he loses 1 stack when you attack him. That's it. So if Ho-Ho basically attacks him, he will lose 1 stack. That's it. But things get more interesting when Lance of Fury goes into this charging state, as you can see right here, where he is glowing a bit yellow and his stacks go from 7 out of 7 stacks to 12 out of stacks now. And as you can see, our allies get these weird icons above their head. So let's break it down. First of all, the same thing applies as when he had the 7 out of 7 stack, that when you reduce it to 0, that you get these benefits. So same benefits. But there is one small difference, and that is that this time that not the character that reduced the stacks to 0 gets energy, but that all allies get the energy, which is pretty sweet. But reducing his stacks to 0 now is way more difficult than it was. But luckily, these things above the character's head, the thing on the right, will make it a bit easier for us. Why? Well, depending on how many stacks of this thing right here you have, it will reduce the stacks of Lance of Fury depending on how many stacks you have. So now I have 1 stack. If I attack Lance of Fury, he will lose 1 stack. If I had 2 stacks and I attack him, he would lose 2 stacks. But how do I get these stacks to begin with? Well, we got 1 free stacks when he goes into this charging state, but we can also gain another stack when that character skills or ults. So if I skill with Ho-Ho, I would get plus 1 stack. But the unfortunate thing is, we can only hold up to 2 stacks max. So we cannot hold 3 or 4 stacks, only 2 at max. Which is quite unfortunate, but still appreciated in reducing the stacks of Lance of Fury. But there's also another benefit with these stacks, and that is that 1, it increases that ally's energy rate for every stack you have, so energy regeneration rate, and it increases that ally's damage. And that energy regeneration rate is quite appreciated for Eclia, but for Eclia to get 1 extra stack, she should ult. And if that ultimate is at a bad timing before the Lance of Fury goes into his charging state, then she would be stuck with that 1 stack the whole time, since she only basic attacks Eclia when she's in an ultimate modus. So if you can time it right, if you get lucky that you can ult after Lance of Fury goes into his charging state, then Eclia would immediately do all her attacks with 2 stacks, which would make reducing the stacks of Lance of Fury a bit easier. But it's difficult to time since it depends how many times you got attacked, how many enemies you killed in the previous wave. But best case scenario, ult with Eclia after this Lance of Fury goes into this charging state. Okay, what else is important about this charging state of Lance of Fury? Well, that is, as you can see in the action bar right here, that he is glowing red. So that means he's charging for something, an attack. That's correct. When he does this attack, that attack will do lots of damage. That's obvious. And that damage is based on how many stacks of this thing he has right here. So depending on how many of those 12 stacks he has. So if I had reduced his stacks to 0, he would go back into that 7 out of 7 state. Well, 0 out of 7, since he regenerates these stacks at the end of his turn only. So if I reduce his stacks to 0 here, he would go back into the 0 out of 7 state. And when he gets a turn, and when his turn ends, you would start with 7 out of 7 stacks. So if I manage to reduce his stacks to 0 out of 12, what happens? As we know, we get some nice buffs, but also his action will be delayed. And he won't do that much damage with that attack. So his action will get delayed. Let's say it goes right here or something, and that attack would do less damage, since he would be in that 0 out of 7 state. But the unfortunate thing is that both these attacks he would do has a chance to imprison your allies. So if any of your allies get imprisoned, if it's an important ally, I just restart, since it will make clearing this MoC in the necessary cycles way more difficult. And the last thing we haven't discussed is, what does this chain thingy right here mean? Well, it means that the next attack he will do will distribute the damage on your allies. So whether it is this attack right here when he got his stacks to 0 out of 12, or this attack right here when you didn't manage to reduce his stacks to 0, the next attack he does will distribute the damage. And that attack will also remove, unfortunately, all these stacks you have. So they are not permanent, unfortunately. And this is basically the most important thing you need to know about Lance of Fury. But all basically comes down to just too many consistent, favorably blast or AoE attacks to reduce his stacks to 0 and kill those conquered allies on the way to make your life a bit easier. That's what it comes down to. But this note isn't only with Lance of Fury, since we also have Wave 1. What is the most important thing we need to know about this wave? Well, as you notice, these enemies also have these stacks, just like with Lance of Fury. That means if you reduce those stacks to 0 out of 10, that you will get some pretty nice benefits. Before we dive deep into these other enemies, the first thing that you should know is that you want to kill this clock guy as fast as possible. Since, as you can see right here, he's glowing red. When he grows red and he gets a turn, he will action forward all the enemies. That's not something you want to happen. So make sure you kill him as fast as possible. And he goes into this charging state like at the very start of the wave, which is a pain. So going back to these new enemies, what's the most important thing to know? Well, when these small enemies attack, they have a small chance to apply refurb on your allies. Why is this refurb thing bad for us? Well, when you have refurb on you, so let's say Ho-Ho has refurb and she gets attacked by any enemy. So let's say he attacks Ho-Ho, then what will happen to Ho-Ho? Her action would be delayed and she would be like, let's say, turned for 1 turn. But the probability of being applied this refurb on you is pretty low, like it happened once in the many fights I had with these enemies. So if it happens and you get attacked again and get these bad things happen to you, then just retry. But you might have noticed that these enemies right here that apply the refurb don't start at the start of the wave. They get summoned by this big enemy in the middle. He summons them, and he even makes use of those summons, since this big enemy in the middle can go into a charging state, which looks like this. When he goes into this charging state, he consumes these enemies. So they are no more on the field, as you can see. Depending on how many of those summons he has consumed, that charge attack of his, right here in the action bar, will do more damage. And it's an AoE attack, and even if he didn't consume any summon of his, that AoE attack will apply vulnerability on all the attacked allies. Since it's an AoE attack, everyone will get vulnerability on him. So how do we make sure he doesn't do this charging attack? Well, by weakness breaking him. That's the only way for him to cancel his charging attack. And as you can see, everyone has these locks on him. That means that attack will be distributed, so the damage will be distributed between all your allies. And that's the most important thing about him. So make sure, like with Lance of Fury, reduce everyone's stacks to 0 as fast as you can to get the nice benefits right here. To get energy, they take more damage, action delayed, additional damage when you attack them. And before he goes into this charging state, make sure all these small summons on the field are dead. But we haven't discussed one enemy, and that is this big robot right here. He is actually the most irritating enemy, I think, since whenever you use your skill or ultimate to attack any enemy, this robot will get a stack. It's actually in percentages, but I will call it stacks for now. Why are these stacks bad for us? Well, because whenever you skill or ult, and that skill or ultimate attacks an enemy, he will gain 1 stack, and the max he can hold is 3. When he has 3 stacks, he will try to summon fishes, if he can. You might have already seen these fishes, since this enemy exists quite some time in the game. So he will summon fish, he will get a speed boost, he will do a bit of AoE attack, but the most irritating thing is this. He will get a turn, he will do all of this, and that turn he will do a single target attack, then he will do another single target attack, which has a pretty high chance of imprisoning the attacked ally. So if you get imprisoned by the single target attack, just retry if it's important ally then, since even if you cleanse it, your action would have already been delayed. And of course, you want to just summon 1 fish, he would summon all the fish he can on the field. So maximum 5 enemies on the field. So he would summon 3 fishes in this case then. And at last, when he goes into the state, when he has 3 stacks, his toughness gets locked. Pretty irritating. When does he go out of the state? At the end of his next turn. But in this wave, you would most likely be focusing this enemy right here with his summons to reduce his stacks to 0 the whole time and weakness break him, so he doesn't do this charged attack of his. So this robot on the side will just die though to the blast or AoE attacks you do, and just hope that you don't get imprisoned with his single target attacks. That's it basically for this wave then. So now let's go to the second node, and I will start with the second wave, since there is where the main enemy is, the most interesting enemy, and that is the true sting. The most interesting thing with this big bug is this. In his first phase, when he has 2 of these red dots, he can summon 2 bugs at the time, which are these bugs right here called the clone bugs. That's how I call them. And in the second phase, when he has 1 HP thing left, he will summon these exploding bugs, who are a bit different in color than the clone bugs. Why are these bugs bad for us? Well, the clone bug can clone himself when he's able to, when his turn starts, and when he attacks, he has a chance to apply wind shear on you. The exploding bugs are the most irritating ones, since when that exploding bug gets a turn, his first turn, he will just charge. The second turn, he will explode, which is indicated right here. And when he explodes, he has a chance to apply outrage on your allies. And what does outrage mean? Your allies will attack a random enemy for 2 turns. So when you get outraged by this exploding bug, when he explodes on you, immediately cleanse that. And one thing I need to mention is, of course, in the second phase, he can summon 3 bugs at a time. So not 2 like in the first phase. And it goes without saying, to make sure that this big bug doesn't explode on you, weakness break him, or just kill him before that. So he should be your focus when you see him in this charging state. And now to the big bug. What's the most important thing about the big bug? Well, he basically works around the wind shear. He applies wind shear, he triggers wind shear. But the most interesting thing about him is just his charging state, which looks like this in the action bar. Why is this bad for us, this charging state? Well, when he gets a turn, when he's charging, he will do a big AoE attack, and all the bugs on the field will have their CC removed, so their crowd control, and they will recover from weakness break. And it does damage based on how many bugs there are on the field. So when you see this big bug charging, or make sure you weakness break him ASAP, or make sure you kill as many bugs as possible before he gets his turn, if you cannot manage to weakness break him before that attack, so that he does as little damage as possible to your allies. And one beneficial thing is when you kill the small bugs is that the big bug will lose around 3% HP, depends on how close his hidden HP is to the percentile stuff. So sometimes 2%, sometimes 3%, sometimes 4%. So let's say around 3%. And all the enemies on the field will get vulnerability debuff. So killing them would be a bit easier, since vulnerability increases their damage taken. And that's the most interesting thing about this bug actually. Just make sure you can do consistent, favorably blast or AoE attacks, but you can also raw dog it with, for example, a Celia or Feixiao. Depends on your whole team plan. But general guideline is killing the small bugs consistently, so all the bugs take more damage because of the vulnerability debuff, and that the charging attack of the big bug does less damage if you didn't manage to weakness break him before that. That's what it comes down to. And now for the first wave, the least interesting part. What is the most interesting thing about these enemies? Let's start with this robot right here. All you really need to know is this about him. He works around the burn mechanic. He has an attack that applies burn on you, and there is an attack of his that is more likely to attack an ally of yours who has burn. And when he attacks a burnt ally of yours, he gets a bit of a damage bonus, which can stack. And he can go into this special state, which basically looks like this. His sword is like a glowing coolant red, where his speed and attack is increased. How do we make him get out of this state? When you weakness break him, he goes out of this state, so he will lose that speed and attack bonus. So you really don't need to really mind this guy. Just make sure you consistently weakness break him on the sideline, and he will be fine actually. And when you see an ally of yours who has burn, expect him to get attacked. But if survivability is no issue for you, you can just easily ignore that. And now we can get to this IPC robot. The most interesting thing about him is, and all the other IPC soldiers actually, is that they work with the performance points. And why are these performance points bad for us? Well, when the enemy attacks you, when they have a performance point, that attack will do more damage, which is bad. It would be not bad if sustaining was no issue for you. But favorably, we prefer the enemies doing not that much damage to us. So how do we make sure that these performance points get removed to begin with? Well, when an enemy attacks you, when they have a performance point, they lose that performance point. But it would already been too late since they have already attacked us with that damage bonus. Other way to remove that performance point is when you weakness break an enemy. Let's say we weakness break this enemy, he would lose that performance point. As easy as that. But how do these enemies get these performance points to begin with then? Well, when they attack you and they don't have a performance point, they get the performance point. So if this enemy right here attacks Jade, he would get +1 performance point. And the next turn, if he attacks, he would lose that performance point. So it's just basically a cycle. The other way for the IPC members to get performance points is with this boss IPC enemy. He has this ability where he generates a performance point for all the IPC enemies, which is a pain. But if you do a nice, consistent, big AoE attack after that, that everyone gets weakness broken, you're good to go. Or you kill them, that's possible too. Or if you have no issue surviving, you can take that extra damage from these small soldiers with their performance points. But it gets a bit more difficult since the other way for an IPC enemy, specifically only the IPC boss enemy, elite enemy then, he has an ability where he can absorb all performance points from all other IPC enemies. Since as we know, at start of the wave, this boss summons the small IPC enemies, and he has an ability which generates performance points for all small IPC enemies. And then the next turn, if he does that ability where he absorbs all IPC members their performance points, you will have like 4 performance points in the worst case scenario then. Well, 5 is this enemy was dead then, but let's say 4. If it does an attack with 4 performance points, he would literally one-shot you. So if you see this boss enemy with this many performance points, even 2 performance points, then your highest priority should be weakness breaking him. So he loses all those performance points. He doesn't one-shot you. So all in all, for this whole wave is basically, if you can just consistently weakness break the enemies, you should be fine. If you weakness break this enemy, he will lose his speed buff and attack buff. If you weakness break any IPC enemy, they will lose their performance points. That is the general guideline I have for this wave for you. But do remember this though, you can play with Mayday before this MoC ends. Since Mayday will release on the 19th of March, and the last day of this MoC is on Sunday, the 30th. But if you are still unsure whether you want to summon for Mayday or not, because you don't know what the drip marketing for 3.3 will be, then you can wait for 6 days since on the 25th of March, it is expected that the 3.3 drip marketing will drop for Honkai Star Rail, if they keep up that 42 cycle that the new thing drops. But if you're like, yeah, but I don't know, I maybe want to summon for Castoris or Anaxa, well, on the 28th of March, the 3.2 livestream is expected, where we will have a better idea of Castoris and Anaxa, their kit, and their corresponding reruns. So if you're not sure about your whole pooling strategy, you can wait until that last moment on the 28th of March to make up your mind whether you want to summon for Mayday or Boho or wherever you want. So you have a better idea of what to expect. So my point is basically, don't stress. You still have a lot of time before this MoC refreshes. The focus is to just get the rewards and you're good to go. But the most important thing is, of course, you having fun. If you don't like to do all the retries because you get unlucky with the imprisonments or whatever, do it a couple of weeks later when you have built your character a bit better. Since you have 6 weeks, you just got to do whatever is the most fun for you. You can raw dog with Fei Xiao or Sela, whatever team comp you can come up with. To no sustain, 0 cycles. So just do whatever you find the most joy in. So I thank you for paying attention and see you the next time. Bye.